Hello everyone, the Skilled Roy here, back with another Legends of Runeterra video, and today we are going over the Veigar reveal. For those of you who don't know, I made a prediction a little while back, just talking about how the math sort of worked out, that Veigar is probably going to be Shadow Isles, and that Ziggs is probably going to be Shurima, obviously dual regioned with their respective Bandle City. So we're going to see if my prediction was correct. If Veigar is there, that sort of makes the math even more accurate, and makes it basically impossible that Ziggs is anywhere other than Ionia or Shurima. My bet is obviously on Shurima. So let's go ahead and take a look at this trailer and see how things turn out. All right, here we go. Masters the Darkness. Oh, it's promising. Hey, we did it. Oh my God, it feels fucking good, dude. So this now confirms, with Veigar being Shadow Isles, that confirms that Ziggs is going to be Shurima and that Rumble is going to be Noxus. Wow, oh God, I betted way too much on that. Oh God. Okay, so sorry guys, let me catch myself here. I'm really excited. So basically what happened here, guys, is that because of how Bandle City is working out, I mathed it out that basically every single region is going to be getting one Yordle. And since we have too many P and Z Yordles, there's no way that they're all going to be P and Z, right? So that was my first thought process. And then I sort of eliminated it down to the basics. And I was like, well, if the Noxian champion is clearly Rumble, and then the Targon champion is clearly Yuumi, Veigar has nowhere else to go besides probably Shadow Isles. And so I got Shadow Isles correct. Now, this also then means that now Ziggs has to choose between Ionia or Shurima, which obviously I think because the pairing with Xerath is very obvious, I think it's definitely going to be Shurima. And then Rumble now is also confirmed for Noxus. This is a really big step for speculation. I'll cover all this in another video probably, because this is the Veigar video. I don't want to go too in-depth on this, but let's go ahead and read the card. It is a 4-mana, 1/4. When I'm summoned, create a Darkness in hand if you don't already have one. Round start, grant your darkness everywhere 1 bonus damage. Wow. Okay, so he's just scaling. He's kind of like Mist, but for spells. Okay. Let's see.
Good, my bonus friend. I totally understood that.
3 mana, deal 2 to an enemy. Okay, wow. So it's slightly under curve, but if you get to activate, you're basically getting free thermo beams every turn, or 3 mana thermo beams every turn.
Ingenuity, Lord Veigar. Stretching my legs. Number 3. It's a tall people thing.
It's a tall people thing.
Time to reveal our superior battle tactics. Retreat!
Yeah, just straight up nukes it. Wow.
A little song, Lord Veigar.
Don't use that word! Yes, please, thank you. Reporting in. Witness.
All right. Gets another darkness. Okay, so all his followers are going to be creating and upgrading this darkness, it looks like. Event Horizon. Oh man, it stuns everything. Jesus, okay. Almost everything. It looks like a roar almost. Yeah, deal 7 damage, okay. Oh my god, it's the minions! They're cannon now! Oh my god, they're Veigar minions? That fits so well. Oh my god. Wow, he has a mech too? God damn. Okay, alright, let's see. Oh, you straight up target the Nexus. Holy shit. Get a second one? Okay, yeah. Just keeps upgrading the damage. Yep, that upgrades the damage again, then he gets them in lethal. Wow. So you can just straight up nuke them, right? Yeah, 8 damage. Wow, they're just dead. 15 damage in 2 turns. Wow. That is actually crazy. That's kind of insane, actually. Holy shit. Okay, we need to see these other cards. All right, first up we have is Darkbulb Acolyte, the 2-mana 2/2. When I'm summoned, create a darkness in hand if you do not have one. And of course, darkness we know is a 3-mana darkness, deal 2 to an enemy. Honestly, this card seems relatively innocuous, but I think this card is actually quite good. If you think of this card as a 2-mana 2/2 that just draws you a small removal spell, like a Mystic Shot essentially, you know, it's actually pretty decent. Obviously, this is a bit different than a Mystic Shot. It's not fast speed, but it also has slightly higher damage. And it's also going to have slightly higher potential for damage, I should say. It starts at 2, right? So I think this is a really solid card for trading. You're going to play this on 2, you're going to trade it, and then you're going to hold on to that removal spell and cast it on something else, and you're going to effectively earn a 2-for-1, basically trading in this card plus the card it generates for 2 of their respective cards. And I think for the early game, this makes perfect sense. So honestly, I am really impressed with this card. Great stuff with this design, I think. It's going to do quite well. We're going to see just how ubiquitous it is. The fact that it has augment can't be understated though, because that means with the darkness proc, it'll then be a 3/2, which will let it trade up into higher rarities of, higher cost of mana, which means that you're going to be getting more tempo as well. We'll have to see just how practical that is and see how easy it is, but I think honestly the card is pretty good. So Darkbulb Acolyte is probably one of the better cards I think out of the set. Next up, we have Stilted Robemaker. This is the 4-mana 3/4 in Bandle City. When I'm summoned, reduce the cost of your darkness everywhere by 1. Now, this is where the card sort of, I think, started taking off, because remember, if you're playing this in Shadow Isles, you have a lot of reliable ways to resummon this card and get multiple copies. I'm thinking things like Chronicler of Ruin, for example. This will let you quickly reduce the cost of darkness to basically nothing, which means that every single card that you're going to be playing that's going to be generating this darkness, from Veigar to the Acolyte and so on, is going to allow you to gain a lot more tempo, because suddenly you have 1 mana, 2 mana spells that are dealing 4, 5, 6, 7 damage, and it constantly lets you trade up on the opponent. And I think that's where this sort of grindy, super close-knit control deck is really going to sort of end up. We don't really have all the cards yet though, because darkness does sort of imply that it's going to be likely a part of Senna's kit as well too. So we'll have to wait for those cards to really see how everything truly fleshes out. But I think Stilted Robemaker, in the context of Shadow Isles, can be very, very powerful, because if you make duplicates of this card, you're going to start popping off like crazy, because that darkness is going to start becoming cheaper and cheaper until you're playing 1 mana deal 7s. And I think that's where this sort of deck just kind of wins the game at that point. Okay, so next up we have is Twisted Catalystr. It is the 2-mana 3/2 with Strike, grant your darkness everywhere 1 extra damage. Now, if you sort of compare this to the other 2-mana Strike bonus effects, things like Mountain Goat and stuff like that, it's kind of comparable. I will say though that when you trade even just 1 time with this, it then makes your darkness pretty effective. Then it's 3 mana for 3 damage. Even at slow speed, that is quite valuable. Combine this with a single Veigar proc, and you're now dealing 3 mana deal 4. And if this guy ever lives an attack and gets a second one off, it is pure gravy from there, because then the card is just paying for itself in dividends, especially if you start trading with this card too, because once you start building damage and trading with your weaker minions to trade up with their early minions, your darkness are really going to carry out the late game, especially once they start dealing more damage thanks to the strikes of the Catalystr. So honestly, really, really cool stuff here. I think this is really, really great stuff. I'm not too sure personally how much mana investment we're going to have, because if we're going to be playing these minions in the early game to get these darkness triggers, I'm a little concerned with how much spell mana we won't be having, because we're going to be playing these units instead. So that's probably the biggest question here, but we'll see. Again, a lot of this is hard to say for sure until we get these Senna cards, probably tomorrow. Okay, so next up we have Whiz and Wizard. Nice name. He's the 3-mana 3/2 with round start, refill 1 spell mana, essentially giving you an extra spell mana every turn. This card seems incredibly powerful, but oddly, I don't really like it in the Veigar deck. I actually much more prefer it in something like the Fizz Tempo deck, the decks that we saw earlier in the spoiler season, where we saw a bunch of the Bilgewater and Bandle City cards that really cared about getting single instances of spell mana. And I think that's where this card's going to see much more play, because I'm not too sure about this card being something I really want to stabilize with. If I'm playing this, I'm not playing any of the other really important minions I'm going to be playing with Veigar, and I'm not sure I really want to be investing into that spell mana. I don't feel like we're going to be casting that many spells with how many units we're going to be playing. I mean, obviously we're going to be playing Darknesses, of course, but like it just doesn't feel like we'll need that spell mana to be irrelevant in those situations. Whereas I feel like the Fizz deck is going to be needing that spell mana a lot more frequently, because they're going to be constantly casting small spells alongside their units. So honestly, it's a tough statement one way or another. Obviously, I'm probably wrong, but I definitely do think that this card is probably better with Fizz than it is Veigar, but that's just my general opinion. All right, next up we got Tenor of Terror, the 4-mana 2/3 impact. When I'm summoned, if you've created a card or killed a unit with a spell this game, summon a Base of Burden. Wow, that is a very interesting effect. So this is a 4-mana 6/6, essentially, sorry, 5/5, I can't do math, that has double impact on it, so it's kind of like a 7/5 in a way. Really interesting sort of card, really solid type of stats here. I question how likely it is for you to be able to play this on 4 and it live. At a 2/3 stat line, I feel like almost every 4-drop in the world trades up on this, and sure, you make the clone, or the flipped clone essentially, but it doesn't feel as though like that is incredibly useful in comparison to like just having better stats in general. we'll have to see. This seems like a really great card against control decks or decks that really aren't going to be able to consistently answer you, because they both represent a pretty decent threat, right? Like if you attack with this on 4, you're getting 5 damage from the straight stats and then 2 damage for the impacts. That's 7 damage straight out. Like that's genuinely not too bad, but I just question whether or not how useful it's going to be in most scenarios if you're facing like anything from like a mid-range deck to even like a slightly slower like control. It's like slightly fast control deck. It doesn't feel like it's going to be that relevant. I could be wrong here. This is a hard card for me to evaluate because I'm really confused as to where I think it can realistically go. So we'll see. I guess it's just you just trade with both of them and try to shore up the early game. Like it's 2 bodies, so it's decent against aggro, but it's just I don't know. I have a lot of questions about this. It feels like this is a bit off the mark for me. All right, next up is Minimorph. It is a 6 mana, transform an enemy into a 3/3 mini-T, and then silence it. This is like Whimsy, but on crack. I don't know how this card is allowed to see print. Truly. So for those who don't know, in the custom design space, which I do a lot of cards in, there's a lot of rules that we've figured out just by looking at how they've made cards. For example, you can't permanently silence champions in almost any way. Except here, we are getting our first card that can quite literally completely nullify a champion without a doubt. And that is truly terrifying, because this card is just super powerful. It's essentially an unanswerable hush that completely nullifies a champion no matter what they have besides spell shield. So this card is very spooky. I mean, obviously you leave them with a 3/3, but and again, most control decks, taking out a champion is gonna be a lot more important than giving them a 3/3, so you probably wouldn't mind that. So I have a lot of questions about this because I'm just really concerned that this is a little pushed for what it is, especially because it's permanent. It just seems like, wow, you really can't answer anything about this, especially when it comes to things like Fiora and stuff like that. The fact that this is burst speed too, like you can't even deny it. Maybe I'm missing something because this card just seems way too strong and I don't understand why it was printed. This is probably the biggest question mark for me so far in this set, and I'm just like, man, why on earth did they make this card? Why did they do this to us? Surely I'm missing something, because this card just seems completely broken. Wild. Completely wild. I have no idea why this is happening. Next up, we have the famous Veigar ability, Event Horizon. Stun an enemy, then stun all enemies with 2 or less power. Create a Veigar in your deck, of course, if this is the Veigar champion spell. So this is obviously really comparable to Roar, but I think what's obviously most terrifying about this is that it's fast speed, allowing you to have an incredibly powerful answer against any aggressive strategy coming in on you. Because if they try to open attack into you with like a swarm of the smaller units, like 1 and 2 drops, you're able to just completely nullify their attack, as well as one large unit as well. So let's say against spiders, where they have a bunch of spiders on the board and they have crowd favorite, you're able to completely nullify an attack at fast speed, which means you can answer it completely at an open attack speed. This card is deceptively powerful, and it can really help them stall out games, and it can really decimate like some of your game plans when it comes to trying to race a Vandal deck. This card is probably one of the more interesting cards here. I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, what about Yasuo? No, don't worry about that. But like this card in particular is just so good. If any card's going to make Yasuo good, I think this card is quite insane. But we'll see. Maybe I'm overestimating it, but I think this card is really good, and it's just going to be an incredibly powerful tool, especially in any control deck that's running Vandal City. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we have Veigar. When I'm summoned, create a darkness in hand if you do not have one. Round start, grant your darkness everywhere 1 extra damage. Once you've dealt 12 damage with darkness, when I'm summoned and round start, create a darkness in hand if you don't have one, and then round start, grant your darkness everywhere 1 damage, and then of course he can target the Nexus now instead of just targeting the minions. So wow, really powerful win condition card. This is the very typical engine into win condition sort of thing that most control decks would love to see. Basically, when he enters the board, he draws you a removal spell. You can blow people up with the removal spell. You constantly get to build damage, which inherently fuels his level up condition. And then of course, when he flips over to the other half, he starts getting the ability to end the game by targeting an enemy's Nexus directly. It's important to note here though that the ability to get darkness every turn is only on the level up half. I think a lot of people are misreading this card and sort of saying, wow, he's insanely good, you get a removal spell every turn. No, it's only on the turn he's summoned, and that's only if you don't have one either. Now this is actually quite important because a lot of the cards, as we saw earlier, you kind of want to be playing on curve and then playing your darknesses right after. So for things like Acolyte, where you're gonna already have a darkness in hand, you're gonna want to play that darkness before Veigar. This gets a little complex when you start thinking of the fact that the curve means that you play turn 2 Acolyte, turn 3 darkness, turn 4 Veigar. It just feels like you're stalling out a lot in that middle turns there. So I'm curious if that's really gonna be the ideal. What I'm perhaps wondering instead is if you play the Acolyte on 2, you actually save Veigar to the very, very late turns. You don't have to, he doesn't have to be on board to get the bonus. So I'm thinking you play Veigar on the turn that you're gonna flip him, essentially. You're probably gonna play him, get the last darkness card you needed, and then play the darkness, hit him, level up, flip to the other side, and next turn draw your next darkness, and then start winning the game from there. Because right now, I'm a little concerned. Having such low stats essentially removes him from combat entirely. He's an engine card, you never want him to leave. And because he's a round start card, he's gonna be a high priority target too. I will admit 4 health is nice, 3 health would be almost unplayable, I think. But I am really concerned that there's so many things that trade up on him, all the different challengers in the game, obviously Thermal Beam, obviously Culling Strike, like there's Flock, like everything kills Veigar. So I'm just like, I'm thinking to myself, how are we going to be able to consistently have him on the board to generate his value when he's such a threat, when he's such a target? And the worst part is for him too, is that yes, you get to draw a darkness spell, and yes, you get to do that with him, but he needs to be on the board consistently to keep getting that value, because even if they just kill it with something trivial and trade up on you, like say with, again, Culling Strike or a Flock, or just having challengers, like playing turn 4 Veigar and they play turn 5 Screeching Drake, you're just like, okay, I guess I die. So I think you're really going to have to make use of the Bandle City and Shadow Isles removal packages to really keep him safe. And I think to really close that out, I think that Bandle City needs some form of counter spell or a spell shield, because otherwise I really don't see that Veigar is going to be able to sustain himself long enough to really get enough value to become good. It's really weird because Veigar, I think, is a solid payoff for darkness, but until we see Senna and her cards, which are obviously intended to be like the pair here, it's really hard to really evaluate Veigar. I assume because Senna's also in this set, that her support is going to be pretty crucial to Veigar, so I'm going to hold off from saying if Veigar's good or bad until I see Senna's stuff, but right now I think Senna's going to have to do some heavy lifting on some angles of this card for it to really make it become a good card, in my opinion. All right, well, thank you so much everyone for watching. I was the Skilled Roy, and this was my quick Veigar rundown. Again, if you want to see my theory about how I figured out that Veigar was going to be Shadow Isles, and that Rumble is going to be Noxus, and that Ziggs is going to be Shurima, I will leave a link to the description of that thread where you can go ahead and read it over and take your best look at it. And if you want to see me speculate and come up with these theories live, well, guess what? You can join me on my Discord, which I have also in the link of this video. We talk about cards there, I ping you guys on new theories. I talk about all sorts of new cool ideas I've come up with, and sometimes they turn out to be completely right. But you know, we can't always get it right, but I think it's a good time, and it's really good sort of community to sort of come in and talk and theory craft, not only for like what's coming up next, but even like new decks or new ideas that you might have yourself and might want some experienced players to help you run through them. There's a lot of different Masters players there who are more than willing to help you with deck building or even just play pattern recognition. But I think that's it for me, so thank you so much everyone for watching. I really appreciate you guys all coming by today. I will see you all soon for Shurima and Ziggs, but until then, I will catch you guys later. Peace out.